Now let's go back to the Middle East and North Africa. For 1,000 years, the North, that includes Russia, the North and the West, have been fighting a war against Islam, which is most of the global South. There's a wonderful book about it by a great historian, friend of mine, William Polk, who just died very recently. It's called Crusaders and Jihadis. It's about the 1,000-year war of the North, which of course includes Russia. That's how the small Muscovy unit duchy extended for large parts of the Muslim world.
Yep.
Included the West, which has been carrying out a war against the Muslim world for almost 1,000 years. Well, okay, when you're colonized and destroyed, it's very hard to have efficient nation states. You go back to the late mid-19th century, Western Africa was in approximately the same state of development as Japan. Good historians have written about this. Basil Davidson, one of the great African historians. Also, African historians themselves have written about it. It was unifying, it was developing, it was wealthy, could have gone on forward. About the same state as Japan. There was one fundamental difference between them. Africa was colonized. Japan was the one part of the global South that was not colonized. And it's the one part that has what we call a successful nation state. Is that just accident? If you know the history, you know it's not accident.
No, it's not.
It's the effect of successful European nation states which destroyed Africa, okay, and blocked African development. Same in the Middle East region. I don't have to run through the history for you. You know it very well.
Of course.
So yes, when they're under, there have been many efforts, say, in Egypt, to try to free themselves from Western colonial rule. Early 1920s, Nasser, Arab Spring, all crushed, not destroyed. There's plenty left that can build on, but beaten down. Actually, if you look at Egypt and the United States, take Egypt and the United States. To compare them sounds ridiculous. In the 1820s, to compare them was very realistic. They were very similar. Both Egypt and the United States were developing societies. They both had ample resources of cotton. Cotton was the oil of the early industrial revolution. It's what made it work. The basis for manufacturing, for finance, for retail, all through the 19th century. Egypt had a lot of it. The United States had a lot of it. Very different conditions. The United States had it under a vicious, brutal system of slavery, the worst in human history. Egypt, it was peasants in a quasi-feudal society. Both were developing a national project. Egypt under Muhammad Ali, as the United States under the Hamiltonian model of independent development. Well, why are they different? Primarily because of a country called England. England, colonies in the United States had freed themselves from British rule. The Egyptians hadn't. Britain still controlled the Eastern Mediterranean, had extensive control over Egypt. Palmerston, leading British statesman, made it very clear and said so that they would never allow an independent Egypt. France joined in as well. Egypt was a rich agricultural country. That's why Napoleon conquered it, because of its rich agricultural resources that could have developed. The difference was the same as between West Africa and Japan. So the development of some meant the crushing of others. Okay, and that's continued. As I said, in the early 20s, there was an Egyptian attempt to free themselves from British domination. It was beaten down. Case of Nasser, it was a war, 1967 war, which essentially crushed. There was a war between radical Islam, centered in Saudi Arabia, secular nationalism, centered in Egypt. In fact, they were literally at war. Recall there was a war in the Yemen with mostly proxy forces, but a lot of the Egyptian army was there. 67 came along, a Western settler colonial society, Israel, had the technological military resources to tilt the balance in favor of radical Islam against secular nationalism. The United States, like Britain before it, has tended pretty consistently to support radical Islam as opposed to secular nationalism. It continues right at this moment. It's part of the reason why you may have seen a comical report this morning saying that some right-wing Norwegian parliamentarian nominated Donald Trump for the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, I did. That was quite comical.
Okay, that's supporting radical Islam against secular nationalism.
Wouldn't it, I mean, Professor Chomsky, wouldn't it be fair to say, if we look at the likes of Hosni Mubarak, if we look at some of the most despotic Arab regimes, they never claimed to be of the radical Islam spectrum. They were ardent secularists. If we look at the likes of Hosni Mubarak, or if we look at Ben Ali of Tunisia, if we looked at of other dictators which the West, namely America, have favoured, they have tended to have been secularists.
Well, it's a mixture, and sometimes the secular forces turned into harsh dictatorships, which the United States supported. Other times they've been taken over by radical Islam. Saudi Arabia, Gulf family dictatorships, UAE. Those are the base for U.S. power. They're the ones the U.S. strongly supports against secular nationalists of the Nasser type. Okay.
Are you suggesting then that America, namely America, as it is the leading superpower, one could still argue, that it's quite indifferent to who the proxy state is, that whether it's quote unquote radical Islam or conservative types of Saudi Arabia or the secular type of Hosni Mubarak and Ben Ali, that America, so long as its hegemony is in place and intact, it's quite indifferent as to who it favors?
All they have to do is be subordinate to U.S. power.
Okay.
They can have any regime they want. But it's been the case, typically, Britain as well, that secular nationalism has often been more of an opposing force to imperial power than radical Islam has been.